Xenogears is a science fiction role-playing video game developed and published by Squaresoft for Sony's PlayStation. It was released on February 11, 1998 in Japan and on October 20, 1998 in North America. The game was never released in PAL territories. It was re-released by Squaresoft as a greatest hits title in 2003, and on the PlayStation Network on June 25, 2008 in Japan and on February 22, 2011 in North America. Xenogears follows protagonist Fei Fong Wong and several others as they journey to uncover the truth behind mysterious, cabalistic entities operating in their world. The principles and philosophies of Friedrich Nietzsche, Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung influence the plot, character design, and world of Xenogears. Additionally, the symbols, theological concepts, and devotional practices of several world religions are represented in fictionalized forms in the game. Major psychological themes are the nature of identity and human memory, particularly as these relate to the phenomenon of dissociative identity disorder. The relationship between humanity and machines is central to the game's plot, as indicated by the presence of giant robots dubbed gears, which almost each playable character can control. Xenogears was generally well received by critics, with a 91% rating on Game Rankings and a score of 83 out of 100 at Metacritic. Reviews particularly praised the storyline with multiple subplots, the gameplay, the characters, the themes, and the generally epic scope of the narrative. It was voted the 16th best video game of all time by readers of Famitsu in 2006. Xenogears has shipped 1.19 million copies worldwide as of March 31, 2003. Gameplay: Xenogears combines traditional role-playing video game structures such as Square's signature active time battle system with new features particular to the game's martial arts combat style. It features two slightly different battle systems. In the first, the user controls human characters in turn-based combat manipulated through the sequencing of learned combos. The second, making use of gears, introduces different sets of statistics and abilities for each character. Xenogears features both traditional anime and pre-rendered CGI movie clips by Production IG to illustrate important plot points. The player advances the protagonist and his companions through a fully three-dimensional fictional world. There is an overworld map with visitable cities, geographical sites, and other important locations spread out across several continents. A couple of locations encountered throughout the game exist not on the original world map, but in the sky. At first, the party only travels on foot, but is eventually permitted to make use of a variety of vehicles, including their gears and the sand submarine Yggdrasil. Battle system Battle in Xenogears is a variant of the active time battle system found in games such as Chrono Trigger and the Final Fantasy series. Most enemy encounters in Xenogears are random. When a battle begins, there is a transition to a separate screen with a combat interface. Player characters use a combination of martial arts moves, ether attacks, and special death blow combinations which are learned through the repetition of specific proportions of strong, moderate, and weak hits. All offensive actions use action points, costing either 3 points, 2 points, or 1 point, corresponding to the intensity of the attack. Each character can initially use only 3 AP per turn, but at higher levels, they can eventually use up to 7 AP per turn. At a certain point in the game, characters can begin using elemental death blows, which, as the name implies, attach elemental attributes to physical combos. In addition to being used for attacks, AP may be saved and allocated to attack points for combo attacks during later turns. A total of 28 AP may be accumulated for combo attacks. Characters can also use a variety of magical abilities for both offense and ally support. These abilities are limited by the number of ether points that are available to a character, which must be replenished using items during exploration sequences. For most characters, these abilities are attributed to ether, a mysterious power to which all humans have access. Some characters' magical abilities are referred to by different names, implying differences in their origins. For example, Fei's magic is called Qi, and Saiten's is called Arcane. While fighting in Gears, Human ether abilities are amplified, though some change or become unavailable during this type of combat. Gear battle. In addition to small-scale, hand-to-hand combat, the characters sometimes fight from within their respective giant robots, called gears. In gear combat, the limiting factor of AP is replaced by fuel, with each attack consuming an amount corresponding to its power. For these battles, death blows may only be executed after first building up the attack level. An abstract concept represented by a number in the bottom left of the gear combat interface. Through the execution of simple strong, moderate, or weak attacks. One death blow is allowed per point on the attack level gauge. There are 3 levels for normal gear death blows and, beyond the 3rd level, an infinite level with its own set of death blows. To reach infinity mode, a character has to stay at attack level 3 while performing any other action. With each turn, there is a chance that infinity mode will be reached. Having a duration of 3 turns, infinity mode allows fuel to be recharged in much larger quantities and, while in this mode, gears have access to infinity attacks. This mode is actually referred to as hyper mode in-game through a little-known text readout found in one of the bonus dungeons at the end of the game. Gears can regain fuel with a charge command. The gears can also activate boosters, which enable them to act faster at a cost of extra fuel per turn. The special option command allows for gear HP restoration abilities and special, fuel-consuming attacks. When a gear has no fuel left, it can no longer execute attacks, use special options, or use boosters. They can, however, charge to regain fuel and use ether abilities. Gear fuel, parts, and upgrades may be purchased in shops or from certain individual vendors. Plot. Setting. Xenogears initially takes place on Ignis, the largest continent of the Xenogears world, and the site of a centuries-long war between the nations of Avi and Kislev. A church-like organization known as the Ethos has excavated gears, ostensibly for the preservation of the world's culture. Although Kislev originally had the upper hand in the war, a mysterious army known as Jbala appeared and began to provide assistance to Avi. With Jbala's help, the Avi military not only recovered its losses, but began making its way into Kislev's territory. As the story unfolds, the setting broadens to encompass the entire world and the 2 floating countries, Shevat and Solaris. Solaris, ruled by Emperor Cain and the Gazel Ministry, commands the Jbala army and the Ethos and secretly uses both to dominate the land dwellers. Shevat has been the only country to evade the control of Solaris. Much of Xenogears' plot and backstory is detailed in the Japanese-only book Xenogears Perfect Works. This book, produced by the now-defunct G-Cube, details the history of the Xenogears universe from the discovery of the Zohar to the start of the game. According to the Perfect Works schematic, Xenogears is the 5th episode in a series of 6. Characters. Xenogears are 9 playable characters hail from different areas of the game's world. The game begins on Ignis, a continent with 2 countries, Avi and Kislev. Fei and Satan at first appear to be from this land, although it is later learned that they originate from the capital cities Aflora and Astranang of the floating countries of Shevat and Solaris, respectively. Fei is the story's protagonist, and has initially lost his memories of his past. Satan is a man whose knowledge of the world and technology often aids in the party's quest. Bart, a desert pirate, is also from Ignis and is the rightful heir to the throne of Avi. Rico, a demi-human with incredible strength, lives in a Kislev prison, spending his days as a gear battling champion. Solaris, a hidden city of advanced technology, is home to several characters in the game. Billy, a pious worker for the Ethos religious group, was originally from Solaris. Ellie, a beautiful Jbala officer of Solaris, is destined to be near Fei and falls in love with him by the end of the game. Maria and Choo Choo are both from Shevat, the floating city and the only place resisting Solaris domination. Emeralda is a humanoid being constructed by an ancient civilization from a colony of nanomachines, and was retrieved from the ruins of the ancient civilization Zeboim. Significant non-playable characters include Krilian and Myung, both leaders of Solaris who seek to revive Deus, a mechanical weapon that fell to Earth thousands of years ago. They serve as the game's main antagonists. Grahf, a mysterious man with immense power, serves as a major antagonist. He follows Fei and his group and often fights them, though his goals remain a mystery until very late in the game. As being the contact, the anti-type and the complement, Fei, Ellie, and Myung have been reincarnated several times throughout the game's history. Story Xenogears centers around the protagonist Fei Fong Wong, an adopted young male in the village, Lohan, brought by a mysterious masked man 3 years ago. The events surrounding Fei's arrival at the village cause him to have retrograde amnesia. During an attack on Lohan from Jbla, Fei pilots an empty gear and fights the enemy, accidentally destroying the village. As a result, Fei and Cyclone, the village's doctor, decide to leave with the abandoned gear to get it away from the village. Fei meets Ellie, a Jbla officer, and Grahf, who claims to know about Fei's past. Eventually, Fei and Cyclone are picked up by Bart, a desert pirate and heir to the throne of Fei. Fei again loses control of himself inside his gear while Bart and Cyclone are attacked by an unknown red gear. Fei wakes up in a Kislev prison and meets Wiseman, a mysterious masked man, who originally brought Fei to Lohan. Fei is able to escape with the help of his friends, but he and Ellie are separated from the rest of the party and accidentally shot down by Bart. They are rescued by the Thames, a movable floating city. After learning Ellie's whereabouts, Jbla attacks Thames to kidnap Ellie and Myung, a Jbla officer, unsuccessfully brainwashes her. Ramses, who holds a vendetta against Fei, attacks Thames, searching for him. Afterward, Billy, an ethos worker on board Thames, allows Fei to use the ethos' advanced medical technology. Bishop Stone, ethos leader, reveals to the party ethos's true purpose of controlling the land dwellers, or lambs, for Solaris. The group follows Stone to Zeboim, an excavation site. They discover a young girl composed of nanomachines, which is what Kralion, a Solarian leader, seeks. Stone takes the girl while the group fights Id, the mysterious Red Gear's pilot, who wants the girl, but is stopped by Wiseman. The group returns and finds Fei awake and standing at his gear with a case of anterograde amnesia. Fei and his friends decide to ally themselves with the floating city of Shavat, the only remaining city capable of resisting Solaris. When entering Solaris, they encounter Emeralda, the nanomachine colony. She attacks at first, but recognizes Fei, referring to him as Kim, much to Fei's confusion. In Solaris, Fei learns that Cyton has been working for Emperor Cain and that Solaris has been producing food and medicine out of recycled humans in the Soylent System facility. The party also learns that the Gazel Ministry seeks to revive Deus and achieve eternal life, while Kralion seeks to possess Ellie. Back at Shavat, Cyton informs his friends that it is actually Fei's split personality. The Gazel Ministry uses the Garisha key, an artifact that manipulates the DNA of massive amounts of humans around the world, turning them into mutants called Wells in order to collect flesh to reconstruct a god called Deus that crash-landed on the planet 10,000 years ago. During this time, Ellie and Fei become romantically involved with each other. They learn that they are the reincarnations of Sophia and Lacan. Lacan was a painter while Sophia was the Holy Mother of Nisan around the time of the war between Shavat and Solaris 500 years earlier. Lacan blamed himself for Sophia's death during the war and, with the help of Myung, became Grahf and sought to destroy the world. Although defeated, he and Myung have transmigrated their minds into other humans since. Kralion and Myung dispose of the Emperor and the Gazel Ministry because they are no longer necessary and kidnap Ellie, the mother, who must be sacrificed in order to revive Deus. Myung is killed by an enraged Ramses as he realizes he has been used, and Ellie turns into Myung, becoming absorbed by Deus. Fei, as Id, attempts to make contact with the Zohar. Wiseman, who reveals himself to be Fei's father, stops him, giving peace to Fei's other personalities. Fei's gear transforms into the Xenogears and Grahf appears, revealing that he had been inside Fei's father's body. At this time, Fei makes contact with the wave existence an extra-dimensional being who is trapped inside Deus and is the source of power for all Gears and learns that he must destroy Deus to free humanity. Grahf, who tries to merge with Fei, is defeated. Fei discovers that he is a descendant of Abel, a young boy who was a passenger on board the Eldridge, a spaceship that was being used to transport Deus, the core of an interplanetary invasion system created by a federation of spacefaring humans, one that was deemed far too dangerous for use and was therefore dismantled and moved. Deus, however, had become self-aware and took over the Eldridge. Amidst the confusion, Abel was separated from his mother and accidentally made contact with the wave existence through the Zohar, Deus' power source. It gave him the power to one day destroy Deus and the Zohar in order to free itself. The wave existence also sensed Abel's longing for his mother and used the biological computer Kadomini to create a woman for a companion. When Deus gained full control over the Eldridge, the captain decided to initiate the self-destruct sequence in an attempt to destroy it. Both Deus and the Zohar survived the explosion and landed on a nearby planet along with Abel, under the protection of the wave existence. He was the sole survivor, but was soon united with the woman that the wave existence had created for him as a companion, Ellie. Abel and Ellie, at first, led a happy life, but Deus had also created Myung, Cain, and the Gazel Ministry to begin a human civilization on the planet, one which would be under their control to one day be turned into wells and be absorbed into Deus to recover its strength. When the now adult Abel and Ellie discovered this, they openly challenged Cain and the Gazel Ministry, but lost. However, through the power of the wave existence, they are able to be reincarnated in later eras to combat Deus. One of these incarnations lived during an ancient technologically advanced era in Zeboim, where Abel's incarnation went by the name Kim and created Emeralda. Fei sets out to destroy Deus and free the wave existence and Ellie. In Merkaba, the party defeats Deus, but they realize that the energy released from the wave existence's shift will destroy the planet. Ellie, inside Deus, tries to move it away from the planet and Fei, in his Xenogears, follows to save her, but both disappear in the rift. Krillin confronts them, telling Fei he only sought to end the pain and suffering that comes with human existence by reverting everything back to when it all began, when all was one, to ascend to the realm of God. Fei rejects Krillin's ideology with his love for Ellie, but Krillin challenges Fei, telling him to prove this love that could make him independent of God, and calls forth Ouroboros, a gigantic serpent-like incarnation of Myung. Xenogears appears and Fei uses it to defeat Ouroboros. Krillin releases Ellie and reveals to Fei that he had planned to become one with God along with Ellie. During her time with Krillin, Ellie had seen inside his heart and realized it was full of sadness and despair for all the atrocities he had committed. Despite everything, Ellie says that Krillin truly loved people more than anyone else. Because no one will forgive his sins, he declines Fei's offer to return and descends to a higher plane of existence along with the wave existence, telling Fei and Ellie that he envies them. Fei and Ellie then return to their planet along with Xenogears and reunite with the rest of the party. Development: Xenogears was produced by Hiromichi Tanaka, who previously worked on the SNES game Secret of Mana. The scenario of the game was written by director Tetsuya Takahashi and by Kaori Tanaka. Yasuaki Hun served as art director, while Kunihiko Tanaka was responsible for the character designs. Tetsuo Mizuno, Tomoyuki Takeki, and Final Fantasy creator Hayabu Sakaguchi were executive producers for Xenogears. Koichi Mashimo, an animation director and his studio Betrain, was in charge of the anime cutscenes. Xenogears started out as an early concept conceived by Tetsuya Takahashi and Kaori Tanaka for the Square game Final Fantasy VII. Their superior in the company deemed it too dark and complicated for a fantasy, but Takahashi was allowed to develop it as a separate project. It is the fifth part of a six-part story detailed in Xenogears Perfect Works. At the end of the game's credits, Episode V appears on screen. The story of Xenogears is influenced by the ideas of Freud, Jung, and Nietzsche, and they are referenced numerous times within the game's narrative. due to a combination of the second disc content being almost entirely composed of single boss battles surrounded by character narration and a large number of unused assets and fragments that can be found included in the code on the second disc. There has long been speculation the game was rushed at the end of production. If this happened or why has never been confirmed by anyone involved in the game's development. While the game is considered finished, signs of rushed development are found throughout both discs, and several story threads were left incomplete. Square had announced that Xenogears may not have come out in the United States due to sensitive religious issues. The English translation of Xenogears was the first instance in which an English localization team worked directly with Square developers. It also was the first major project of Square translator Richard Honeywood. According to Honeywood, translating the game was a particularly difficult task due to it containing numerous scientific concepts and philosophies. Square Enix released Xenogears on the Japanese PlayStation Network on June 25, 2008 and in North America on February 22, 2011. Audio equals. The music in Xenogears was composed by Yasunari Mitsuda, composer of the SNES title Chrono Trigger. The Xenogears original soundtrack was released on 2 discs and published by G-Cube in Japan. The score contains 41 instrumental tracks, in addition to a choral track and 2 songs. According to Mitsuda, the music of Xenogears belongs to the traditional music genre. Though he first described it as stemming from a world of his own imagining rather than any specific country, he has also claimed a strong Irish or Celtic music influence. There are 2 vocal tracks included on the OST, and both are sung by Joanne Hogg. One of the tracks, Stars of the Tears, did not appear in the final version of the game. It was originally intended to play in a cutscene at the start of the game along with the main staff credits. The scene, however, was removed for pacing issues, as it would have made the combined opening movie and introduction scenes last roughly 10 minutes. The other, small 2 of pieces Screeching Shards, was the first ending theme with sung lyrics to ever appear in a game developed by Square. An arranged soundtrack of Xenogears also composed and arranged by Mitsuda was released as Creed. For Creed, he expanded on the theme from the original album of having Celtic influences in easy-to-listen-to pop tracks to create an album of arranged Xenogears music with a more prominent Celtic style. The album contains a mixture of vocal and instrumental tracks, and combines Japanese and Celtic music together in its pieces. The album features 5 vocal tracks and 5 instrumental tracks. The main lyricist, Junko Kudo, wrote the lyrics to 4 of the 5 vocal tracks, while Mitsuda wrote the lyrics to the titular track Creed, which were then translated from Japanese to Gaelic for the recording. Celtic singer Joanne Hogg did not reprise her role in Creed. Instead, Tetsuko Honma sang the 4 tracks written by Kudo, while Amir Quinn sang Creed. In October 2010, Mitsuda announced that he planned to work on Myth, the Xenogears orchestral album, a second arranged album of music from the game, in an orchestral style. He took suggestions from fans as to which tracks to include. Merchandise equals. There have been several Japanese books and comics published concerning the Xenogears franchise. Xenogears God's Slaying Story, a series by Masatoshi Kusakabe, was published by Shueisha in 1998. GQ published both Xenogears Perfect Works and a memorial album named Thousands of Daggers, which contains the entire script to the game in Japanese, along with screenshots. 2 manga books, Xenogears Comic Anthology and Xenogears 4 Coma Comic, were released by Movic. Movic also released wall scrolls, notebooks, pins, keychains, stickers, and postcards depicting the Xenogears cast. Reception: Xenogears was a commercial success in both Japan and North America. It sold over 890,000 copies in Japan by the end of 1998. As of March 31, 2003, the game had shipped 1.19 million copies worldwide, with 910,000 of those copies being shipped in Japan and 280,000 abroad. As a result of these sales, it was re-released as a greatest hits title in December 2003. In Japanese gaming magazine Famitsu, Xenogears was voted the 16th best video game of all time by its readers in a poll held in 2006. On a similar poll at GameFAQs, users of the website voted Xenogears the 32nd best game ever in 2005. It was placed in the same position in IGN's Top 100 Games, Reader's Choice feature in 2006, and as number 28 in 2008. Critical response Xenogears was met with critical acclaim. Electronic Gaming Monthly praised the story, characters, gameplay, graphics, and soundtrack. IGN described it as the hands-down best RPG of the year, praising the storyline, gameplay, graphics, presentation, and soundtrack. GameSpot described it as one of Squaresoft's best role-playing games, praising the story, gameplay, and audio, but criticized the lack of graphical polish. Allgame pointed out in a positive light that the character battles are unlike most role-playing games from this company. Retrospectively, Edge commented that although it is considered by some to be a multi-million-yen, convoluted science fiction vanity project, Xenogears nevertheless remains one of the most keenly eulogized PlayStation RPGs. The magazine also noted that it was Takahashi's most challenging and pure work, and that the Xenosaga series never quite matched up to Xenogears. The game's story and characters were well received. Electronic Gaming Monthly said it is rich in story and character development. Game Informer and Next Generation agreed that the plot was one of the game's highlights, the former drawing comparisons to Star Wars, Star Blazers, the Old Testament, and many other Square games, making it a game every RPG fanatic must play. IGN said the storyline is intricate, engrossing, deep, complex, and once in a while even confusing, until more of the real underlying plotline is uncovered. GameSpot said the story is excellent, and thought-provoking, but said it can be a little preachy at times, but went on to say that the religious and existential themes enhance the story and, our understanding of the game's deep characterizations. Game Revolution described the storyline as epic, and fabulous with many twists and turns, and a large cast of characters. RPGFAN said the story is unique and probably the most complex and interesting of any RPG, giving it a 99% rating for the story. Retrospectively, Edge praised the plot scope and ambition and the protagonist as the most complicated Freudian hero in video games, but said it has a flawed script and muddy translation, as well as too many cutscenes, especially on the second disc, where the use of the world map is restricted for an extended period and the amount of cutscenes increases. Years after the game's release, Jeremy Parish of Electronic Gaming Monthly called the game's plot one of the wackiest game plotlines ever, but said that it actually makes sense if the player ignores all of the CD plots. IGN, however, stated that despite having too many cutscenes and a sometimes confusing plot, immersion is a key factor in Xenogears and the questions you may have about the storyline are all answered at some point in the game. Following the PSN release, RPGFAN's James Quentin Clark said Xenogears has hands down the best single story I have seen in any video game, giving it a 100% rating for the story. Reviewers largely praised Xenogears' gameplay. Next Generation praised Square's active time battle gauge and said that inclusion of the AP meter and combo attacks is not only refreshing in a turn-based RPG, but gives players a higher level of interaction during battle. IGN claimed that the most impressive feature in combat is the ability to use massive gears, or mechs, noting that Square's attention to programming these battles is made evident by how visually satisfying they are. IGN praised the game's exploration, saying that the ability to jump and climb adds even more depth to exploration of different environments and distances Xenogears from being too straightforward of a traditional RPG, the only complaint being that the rotating camera is sometimes clumsy. The soundtrack was well received. Electronic Gaming Monthly said the game sounds as beautiful as it looks. GameSpot said it expertly uses audio to push the story along, and noted that many of the game's tracks include voice or chanting and all are appropriately uppity or low with the game's mood, but said there were many areas with silence or ambience making the game's soundtrack a tad sparse. Xenogears was the first Square game to feature voiceovers and anime cutscenes. Electronic Gaming Monthly said they are some of the slickest animation cinemas they have seen. Game Revolution praised the absolutely spectacular and stunning hand-drawn anime cutscenes, but stated that they were sparse and poorly synced with the voice acting. Legacy. Shortly after Xenogears was released, there was speculation of a sequel being released, although this never occurred. While Xenogears has never had an official sequel or prequel, there was wide speculation that Namco and Monolith Soft's Xenosaga was a prequel when it was first announced. Tetsuya Takahashi was the director and writer for both Xenogears and Xenosaga and has noted that with our relation between Square, I think it is difficult for us to say it is a direct sequel or prequel. Approximately 20 members of the Xenosaga development staff has previously worked on Xenogears. On the connection between Xenogears and Xenosaga, Takahashi has stated, "It's probably more suitable to say that it follows the direction and style of Xenogears. Now that we are under a different company, we figured we should start everything from scratch all over again." Though there are familiar faces that serve as important characters in Xenosaga, others are more like self-parodies, so we don't really want Xenogears fans to overreact. Like movies, sometimes you have the director of the movie or friend of the leading actor appearing as cameos, so it's similar to that. Several members of the Xenogears staff came together in 2008 to work on Sands of Destruction, a role-playing game for the Nintendo DS, published by Sega. These staff members include Masato Kato, Kunihiko Tanaka, and Yasunari Mitsuda. See also, Monolith Soft, Xenosaga, Xenoblade Chronicles, Xenoblade Chronicles X. References. External links, official North American website.